From Ukraine. I am again coming to you from Odessa, not from Kiev, as I'm on a bit of a summer vacation, although now I'm, I guess, in studio in another one of these makeshift studios with somewhat of a green screen behind me. It's not a green screen as in a proper TV studio set, but there's some green in back of me, and the lighting isn't the greatest, but it's a lot better than it's been lately, so it's a relief to see that. It is parliamentary election night here in Ukraine. My apologies that I haven't been able to announce this broadcast in advance. I do see someone is tuning in at this very moment. I would appreciate if you could let me know whether the sound is okay. I think it is. I'm rather pleased, I think, with what appears to be decent quality audio and video, but if you could confirm that, that would be I would very much appreciate that. So I'll delve right into what we have in the form of results. For those who are not aware, I'm getting comments saying sound is good but a little low. All right, well, if it's a little low, then I'll try to speak up a little bit. For those who are not already aware, we're having a snap parliamentary election today in Ukraine, or at least an early parliamentary election. The parliamentary election was due to take place later this year, but on day one of Volodymyr Zelensky's presidency, the new Ukrainian president called snap parliamentary elections. He rose to power seemingly out of nowhere, coming from being an actor and a comedian who played the role of a teacher turned president on television, and now he is the president of Ukraine. But when he did become president of Ukraine, he didn't have any support from the Verkhovna Rada, Ukraine's parliament, and right away on his inauguration day, he called for the snap parliamentary elections, which have taken place. Ukrainian voters went to the polls. They stopped voting about 3.5 hours ago, and the results are showing yet another resounding victory for Zelensky. So Zelensky now has a party called Servant of the People, just like the name of his television show, which was also Servant of the People. And the Servant of the People party, according to the exit results, has received about 44% of the vote. But for those of you who are not aware or who were not tuned into my broadcast earlier in the day, the way the system exists, at least currently in Ukraine, the Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, is decided about half and half by parliamentary, nationwide parliamentary style vote, in which the parties produce lists and they get proportional representation based on the vote that they receive today, with 5% being the threshold to get into the parliament. But the other half, and it's not exactly half because of the situation in Donbass and Crimea, but almost half of the seats are decided by basically local district races, in which the person who comes in first grabs the seat. Single member districts, they're called, something like that. And we don't have clear results on that yet, so I don't want to jump the gun and say that Zelensky's party has indeed secured about 44% of the overall seats in the parliament. That much is not clear, although it is clear that Zelensky's party, at least based on the exit polls, and the first one was putting Zelensky at about, or the Servant of the People party at about 43.9%. The most recent update I have seen is 44.2 2%. So for a little more than half of the seats at stake in the Verkhovna Rada, Zelensky's party has received about 44% of the vote. The vote tally is not going to be final tonight. We're about 30 minutes to midnight. It may be final as soon as tomorrow morning, but what is very clear is that this is a big win for the Servant of the People party, but it appears that Zelensky is going to need to form a coalition in order to rule the parliament, to control the Verkhovna Rada. And Zelensky has already floated that he is considering forming a coalition with the new party belonging to or led by Sviatoslav Vakarchuk, who is a Ukrainian rock star. Vakarchuk is leading the new Holos party. Holos means voice, and Vakarchuk's party has, according to the exit polls, received about 6.5% of the vote, enough to cross the threshold and enter the parliament. The Holos party is polling fifth, I believe, trailing obviously well behind Servant of the People, but also behind three other parties, they being the pro-Russian party, which is in second with about 11 or a little more than 11% of the vote, followed by former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko's party and former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko's party. Those are the 2 through 4 places, and Sviatoslav Vakarchuk's Holos party is in 5th place, and it appears that only 5 parties will be qualifying for the parliament, but there is a 6th party that's somewhere around 4 to 4.5%, so it's not all said and done, and that party, I guess, could cross the threshold, but it appears right now that there are 5 parties that will make it in the Verkhovna Rada, and at the moment, it's looking like the most likely scenario would be a coalition between the party of a comedian slash actor turned president and the party of a rock star turned parliamentarian. Although maybe I should note that Vakarchuk did previously serve as a parliamentarian, although it was a very brief stint. It was more than a decade ago, and after about a year he quit. I believe Vakarchuk wasn't too satisfied with what he saw within the Verkhovna Rada back then. But now it appears his new party, the Holos party, is going to enter the parliament, and as of now, the most likely scenario is, excuse me, I'm having some technical difficulties on my phone. I'm back. Sorry if I did momentarily cut things out. But yeah, so the most likely scenario, as I've been saying, is a coalition between Zelensky's Servant of the People and Vakarchuk's Holos party. But this isn't certain. It would be nice if I could deliver you a little more certainty, but things can move a little slowly based on the system that Ukraine has for electing its parliament. And we're going to have to obviously wait, not just beyond election night, but some amount of days for an answer, for a final answer on the coalition. But I'd say there's a pretty solid chance, and actually, for that matter, going into today's vote, a lot of people were predicting that there would be a tally something like this in a coalition between Zelensky and Vakarchuk, and that being because Zelensky's party and Vakarchuk's party are basically the reformist parties right now. The party that's in second place, they're called the Opposition Platform for Life. It's basically the latest version of Ukraine's pro-Russian opposition, and Zelensky is not keen on forming a coalition with them, nor is he keen on forming a coalition with the third place party, which is Petro Poroshenko's party. Zelensky recently, as I covered back in April, defeated Poroshenko in the presidential election. Poroshenko was the incumbent, and Zelensky was the upstart challenger, and Zelensky just won in a landslide victory, but there's still, if not bad blood, maybe Zelensky and Poroshenko aren't the best of friends, and a coalition between the two of them isn't so likely. And Tymoshenko, who has the fourth place party, she's kind of part of the old guard here in Ukraine as well. So a coalition between Zelensky and Tymoshenko probably wouldn't make so much sense either, but we'll see if the numbers work out so that a coalition between Zelensky, the servant of the people, and Vakarchuk's Holos is indeed enough to rule the parliament. I just want to let you know right now that I'm going to try to keep things pretty brief tonight. It's already close to midnight here. I do see a couple people tuned in. Please feel free at any point in this broadcast, if you've got any comments or questions, feel free to chime in and I'll address them as your comments and questions come in. I'm going to stick to Ukraine tonight. I don't have any formal agenda for this broadcast, as I have been trying to come up with, if nothing else, a key topics list, maybe with it's a little reference to Bilderberg right there. But on my Sunday streams as of late, I've been trying to somewhat stick to key topics. But tonight I'll be sticking to merely Ukraine. This is an election night broadcast, not coming from the capital of Kiev, but coming from somewhat of my summer vacation destination of Odessa. I filmed earlier today overlooking the Black Sea and the port in Odessa, and tonight I'm in studio. If you are just tuning in at the moment, the latest figures I have are 44.2%. Big victory for Zelensky's Servant of the People party, but once again, I'm reminding you that those figures are not for the overall parliament. It's only a little more than half of the parliament that's decided by that percentage. It's supposed to be a 50-50 split between the individual candidates, the percentage they make up of the parliament, and the party list candidates, the percentage they make up. It would be a 50-50 split if it weren't for the fact that today's election is not taking place in the occupied territories in Donbas nor in Crimea, which is now very much part of Russia, but we can save that discussion for another day. Maybe I will chime in with some personal observations of mine. So I have been in Ukraine, time flies, since I left Greece on the 9th, I think it was. So yeah, I've been in Ukraine since the 9th of July. So almost 2 weeks now in Ukraine, and I've spent about half of that time in Odessa, where I'm going to be camped for a while. And I was also in Kiev, and I was in Kharkiv. And Kiev is not only the capital, but the largest city in Ukraine. And Kharkiv is the second largest city, although it's largely overlooked. And I would say, granted, I'm not in Kiev right now. I'm in Odessa, which is not nearly as political of a city as Kiev. But I would say Um, Not so much excitement surrounding this election, far more excitement surrounding the presidential election that took place back in April, although I must say that the the resounding victory for Zelensky back in April was more so of a protest vote than anything. But I was in Kiev during the presidential election back in April. I recall there was this huge stadium debate between Zelensky and Poroshenko, and lots of big rallies, and there were lots of candidates in the run-up to, or in the first round of voting. I don't sense nearly as much excitement. I wouldn't say that there's a whole lot of excitement about Zelensky's party, but Zelensky has successfully parlayed his landslide victory into a victory here with the parliamentary elections. But I would say if Zelensky's party is garnering 44% of the vote, at least according to the exit polls, and at least within the parliamentary list section of the voting, then if there isn't overall excitement about Zelensky, then I'd say there's still a great deal of support for him. And I've seen some comments coming out of pundits in the West saying that if indeed this is a victory for Zelensky, and if Vakarchuk's party will indeed be making it into the parliament and most likely forming a coalition with Servant of the People, then some of the pundits in the West are saying, well, this is a victory for reform and the reform agenda in Ukraine and for the pro-Western orientation of Ukraine. And it's kind of interesting given that back in April, there were lots of questions about Zelensky's or what would be the geopolitical orientation of Ukraine under Zelensky. There was a lot of talk among some pundits and publications and media that Zelensky was the pro-Russian alternative to Poroshenko. Now that might have been a mischaracterization, and based on what we've seen thus far with the handling of the war in the East and Ukraine's relations with Russia, I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like Zelensky is a puppet of Putin or the pro-Russian president, but there was a lot of talk about this. And all right, question, this just randomly turned on in my pocket, LOL. Well, I'm glad you randomly joined in. But Zelensky is a native Russian speaker. Ukrainian is definitely not his first language. And there was a lot of talk back in April that if Poroshenko were to be ousted and replaced by Zelensky, then there's concern among some Western pundits that the geopolitical orientation of Ukraine might need to be shored up. But it does not seem, based on a couple months we've seen of Zelensky, that Ukraine is shifting back toward Russia. That doesn't seem to be the case whatsoever. I think it remains very much up in the air just how much reform will take place under Zelensky. But if he does indeed have the Verkhovna Rada backing him, which appears will occur, then he's not going to have a whole lot of excuses if he can't deliver on reform and deliver on his battle against corruption. But it's certainly too early to make a judgment based on his success or failure thus far, especially given that he has not had the parliament backing him, but he apparently will shortly. Anyone have any comments or questions? I'm going to be wrapping this up in a couple minutes if comments and questions don't start flying in, which if they don't, that's no... Here we go. Love your videos. They're super informative. Question though, how do you procure the funds to travel so often? All right. I'm not procuring a whole lot of funds. I actually have discussed this quite a bit in videos past on my channel. If you would be so kind, because this is an election night broadcast and I'm trying to stick to Ukrainian politics and and the election. I'm going to try to I'm going to postpone answering the question, but not for long. So I've got a couple weeks or a few weeks left in Odessa, and I'm not going to be as focused on news and geopolitics as I have. No problem. The commenter is saying, oh, my apologies. And I'm saying no problem, but I'm going to be addressing this in coming weeks. I've addressed it a bit in some previous videos about travel and journalism that I've previously shot for my channel. But over the next few weeks, I'm going to try to do some vlogs and get into a little more personal stuff, because it's going to be somewhat of a summer retreat, I guess I would call it. For me, I've been going very hard lately on the travel and I guess the election trail ever since Bilderberg. This is now third election in a span of, I guess, 5 weeks. So every other Sunday. So it was the Istanbul mayoral election 2 weeks following that. It was the Greek parliamentary election 2 weeks following that. Is today the Ukrainian parliamentary election. And I'm going to take it easy somewhat over the next few weeks, and I'll try to delve into some personal matters. Any questions or comments about the election today or politics in Ukraine? I don't think that there's any immediate update to the results, but I'm going to check right now. What do you think is the biggest thing that will impact in the region? You mean the biggest impact on the region stemming from this election? Could you elaborate on that question, please? Or do you just mean, I'm not clear. Please, if you could enoelaborate on that question. But I'd be glad to talk about how this relates to the region. I guess if the question is indeed what might be the biggest impact of this election the biggest impact on the region, I'm not entirely clear, but I'll go that route anyway. So I don't think that this parliamentary election is going to have a big impact on the region. Our circumstance, it might, but 4 minutes ago, so back a few months back in April, a lot of pundits, especially in the West, were claiming that, if Zelensky wins, then Ukraine might not necessarily in course. It could slightly fall back into Russia's orbit, and that just doesn't appear to be the case. I would say that the election today has much more of an impact on domestic Ukrainian politics as opposed to regional politics. And a lot of people see the election today and the apparent results as a sign that maybe major reforms are coming in Ukraine, and that maybe there is going to be a significant battle against corruption and a battle against some of the entrenched individuals, or I guess a lot of them will be replaced now, and maybe a battle to reform some of the institutions in Ukraine that could use some democratic reforms, at least in the eyes of many pundits in the West and others, and a lot of people within the country. Hello, keep up the good work. Which side do you think the victor would lean, Russia or the West, and how is Russia viewing this? Okay, so yeah, like I'm saying, the broader geopolitical implications, at least in my opinion, were much more so to do with the presidential election that took place back in April that brought Zelensky to power, as opposed to the election today. I would say has much more of an impact on domestic politics. But yeah, I could read into this somewhat, how it might impact things with regard to Russia. So if Zelensky indeed gets control of the parliament, and if indeed he succeeds in passing a lot of reforms, then I would read into that as not being something that the Kremlin, that the Russian government would be so keen on. I mean, I think if I mean, just theorizing and wargaming a little bit. If the Kremlin's view is that they want Ukraine to crawl back into its orbit, then I don't think the Kremlin wants to see a lot of progress in the battle against corruption and instituting economic reforms primarily so that Ukraine grows economically. If Ukraine, if the economy improves significantly in Ukraine, then I would say the country would increasingly fall out of Russia's orbit. There are major there are major issues, not just the war in Donbass. I mean, there's a lot at stake having to do with gas and pipelines, but I'm not so sure that it's worth delving into right now toward the end of this broadcast. If you are interested in me delving into the issues relating Nord Stream and Russia's attempts to bypass Ukraine and its gas deliveries to Europe and how that might impact the Ukrainian budget and finances and what's all at stake and how that might theoretically make the possibility of war or ramped up war more likely in Ukraine. Some people theorize about that. I could get into that, but it's a little much to delve into at the end of this broadcast. But generally speaking, yeah, I would say, as I've been repeating, I don't think the notion of Zelensky being a puppet of Putin or being a pro-Russian president, I don't think that's come to fruition. I don't think it will be coming to fruition. And right now, the parliamentary election has a lot more to do with what's going to happen domestically in Ukraine, as opposed to there being a geopolitical shift. Ukraine has a pretty strong president compared to most other countries in Europe with their parliamentary systems. However, the parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, does very much matter in Ukraine, and if the parliament is not supportive of the president, then it's very difficult for the president to have any progress with his agenda, because this country isn't a dictatorship. Any other questions, any other comments? I see some new people are now joining in the end. Question. Sorry if this also does not specifically relate to the parliamentary election, but with the way things are going right now, I didn't finish reading that. I need to scroll down. There's something about Donbass, sorry. Okay, here it is. But how do you see the war in Donbass going from here? You know what, I'm no expert prognosticator with regard to this stuff, but it keeps dragging on, and every time I come back to Ukraine, regardless of whether Poroshenko's in power, whether Zelensky's in power, whether Zelensky's president with no parliament backing him, or now it looks like it's going to be Zelensky president with the parliament backing him. Just regardless, I keep coming back to Ukraine, and the war keeps raging on in Donbass. And you know what? This might tie into the pipeline issue. Comment, thanks for the analysis. Finally, are you safe there as an American journalist? Yes, in Odessa, I'm totally safe. In Kiev, I'm totally safe. I don't think I have access to Donbass. I would love to. That would be dangerous, but I would love to go to Donbass and check it out. But as an American journalist who isn't just merely repeating everything that the Kremlin or the Russian government says, I don't know if they're going to let me into Donbass. I would like, and then again, it probably wouldn't be very safe there because there is a war there. And regard to the question of is it going to keep going, it seems like it's going to keep going. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. Everyone keeps talking about this Normandy format, where basically Ukraine, Russia, France, and Germany, they sit down around a table and they talk things out and try to put an end to the war, and it never happens, and it keeps going. And some people theorize that if Russia finalizes its plan to cut out its gas transit across Ukraine, then that will make increased conflict even more likely. This is just a theory. I'm not saying I subscribe to this, but there's the theory that if Russia no longer needs to rely on Ukraine for gas transit, then it's not going to mind so much if the separatists it's supporting in the east continue to fight, or maybe even ramp things up in the fight with the Ukrainian military. So basically, I don't know how this thing is going to come to an end, but it doesn't seem like it's coming to an end anytime soon. Zelensky campaigned on bringing the war to an end, but it doesn't seem like he's injected any really fresh ideas thus far into bringing it to an end. And it doesn't seem like he's had any success thus far at bringing the war in Donbass to an end. So I don't know when it's going to end. It just seems like it's indefinite warfare in the far east of Ukraine. Any other questions or comments? We're now past the half-hour mark, so I'm going to try to wrap this up now. We are right about midnight. I will check one last time if there are any new results. I don't think there are, but I'll see if we do have any news that I haven't seen before. We went no, it's not looking like we have anything. So most likely what I'll be doing is sometime next week, I'll probably, maybe as soon as tomorrow, but probably not, but sometime next week, whether it's part of a vlog or just its own video report, I'll provide some update, because I'm going to be here in Ukraine. I'm not going anywhere. So I'll provide some update to the election results and the process of forming a coalition. But for those of you just join, where are you today? I'm in Odessa, Ukraine. I'll be here for the next couple weeks or more. Yeah, so for those of you who weren't tuned in at the beginning, it appears that the new party, Servant of the People, the party of new Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, has won in a big way. However, it appears that they're going to need to form a coalition, and it appears that they're going to try to form a coalition with the party of a Ukrainian rock star, Sviatoslav Vakarchuk. His Holos, or Voice party, is in 5th place, and they're seems like they've passed the parliamentary threshold, and the plan, as far as we know, is for this actor, comedian turned president, and this rock star turned parliamentarian to team up and form a coalition. Nothing's said and done. The results are not final. But yeah, it seems like that's the direction we're going. All right, Josh, I got to head out. I appreciate the update. Have yourself a good day. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I need to head out as well. So for everyone who has watched and followed along on this election day and election night, and I guess now morning, the clock has struck midnight, so the election day is over, but the results are not yet final, so I'll be reporting to you sometime over the next week, just giving you an update on the election results and what's ahead for Ukraine's parliament and things in general in Ukraine. But thank you very much for watching, for following along, and goodbye for now from Odessa, Ukraine. See you sometime soon.